Hello, everybody, and welcome to the ABT Time podcast. And this is our 40th episode. We have gone quite a long distance so far. As a matter of fact, Matt, is it a year now? Must be something like that, right?
Just about. Yeah, just about.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe.
Something close. Okay. For all of our faithful listeners, thanks for following along. And the ABT course is, of course, booming. In fact, we got a great guest today, but before we get to her, going to spend a few minutes here telling you what's been going on lately with the course and lots of big things. So we're kind of on hiatus at the moment. We finished the 25 rounds in about April. The one group we're still doing a lot of work with is Pfizer's global epidemiology team. And they're basically turning into our workshop for the new model for the narrative gym, which is kind of ABT 2.0 is what we like to talk about it or call it. What happened with Pfizer was we ran the course with about 15 people there, and they were getting so much out of it. They said, this can't stop. We've got to have a second version of it. And we've been thinking for a long time, how do we do that? We don't want to give another 10 lectures. And then it came to us, which is, let's do once a week, the narrative gym. Let's have everybody get together for one intense hour. And what we do with it is for that hour, for the most part, one person is assigned each week to give a presentation, a 3-minute talk where they're only allowed 3 slides. Then the whole group of 15 people that all did the course are basically our builders. And then we set to work with the 5 key questions. What is the problem? What's the problem? What's the ordinary world? What's at stake? What is the conversational ABT? And what's the Dobzhansky? And that fills about a half an hour, and people are typing stuff into the chat room. As a matter of fact, what we do is we have a scribe going there on the screen who's entering in the notes as we go along. And by the time you're done, the presenter has got a whole ton of notes to go to work with, and just basically a 15-person writer's room think tank session to help them shaping the narrative of their project. And it's going wonderful. We're in, I think, the 7th week of doing that, and everybody's loving it. So that's what we're doing with Pfizer. And now it's checked out so well that, as according to plans, we're going to scale it up on August 2nd to a much bigger version that will be more open to the general public, which is with 4 partner groups who are now locked in. U.S. Forest Service, Federal Aviation Administration, their Flight Aviation Center in Atlantic City, New Jersey, 5 Gyres Ocean Conservation Group, or Ocean Plastics, and the National Park Service, who were partners in about 9 or 10 rounds of the course itself. So tons of people there. And I'll keep hyping this to you every episode, but starting August 2nd, we'll be doing that. Those sessions will actually be 90 minutes. There'll be 2 presenters, one each from 2 of the groups. And week after week, the narrative gym, you go there, you work it out, and your brain is engaged for 90 minutes of working on all this ABT stuff. And that's how you begin to develop narrative intuition. And we've seen it with the Pfizer group. They did a great job of the course, but if you just do the course and walk away, you're not on the pathway towards building the intuition. You've got to believe in this narrative gym concept, which is just all it takes an hour and a half a week, but it's the coming back over and over again that you begin to develop the intuition and understand a feel for it. Now, a very cool thing also has happened about 2 weeks ago. I got asked to be on a panel for a government organization called Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. They did a thing with the National Academy of Sciences and asked me to be one of 4 communications folks to talk on that panel. And in preparation for that, I spoke to a friend of mine who works with that agency, who told me that problem day to day there for all of them is they're over communicated to. They get sent too many newsletters and updates and briefings and emails, and they're required or expected to read all this stuff. And so much of it is just off the narrative, basically, of what they're working on. They've finished reading it, like, why was I sent this with the expectation of reading it? All of which cued in my mind a very clear agenda, 3 recommendations, which I presented at that panel, and then thought they were so much on the money that I wrote them up last week as an editorial, which has been accepted to MedPage and probably come out next week. And it's about this. It's about how the narrative ABT is maybe one of the first and really only constructive tools to address the problem of the information fire hose that people have complained about for decades. This information comes spewing out. How do you pull back on the information fire hose? The answer is narrative, and the tool is the ABT. This is what we're beginning to develop here with this training. And so my 3 recommendations were: number 1, learn the ABT. Number 2, realize that templates are the implementation of the ABT. And that for 100 years, the science world has been using one big template, the IMRAD, Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. Nowadays, you see structured abstracts in the more popular journals, and you're seeing templates being used in news services. Take a look at Axios and how they put their stories together. Templating is a manifestation of the information fire hose inundating people and the need to clamp down on it and prioritize information. So that editorial, I think, is going to be a lot of fun, because I think a lot of people, the 3rd big recommendation that I had was: first, learn the ABT. Number 2, put to use templates. And number 3, hire a narrative officer, one individual whose job full-time is to look at this information flow and apply narrative structure to it, and realize that people need to be getting material that's on the narrative for them and not just the fire hose. So that's going to be the title of the editorial, which is, you want to combat the information fire hose, hire a narrative officer. And we'll see where that leads to. But one of the main things it leads to is hopefully helping a lot of people with communication, which is our specialty here in ABT land. And one of the things that happens all the time is I get emails from folks through our main Gmail account. And some of them are so innocent. People will write, like undergraduates sometimes, like Lincoln Scorzer, the guy we had on a few months ago, who did his undergraduate thesis at Harvard on the use of comedy in climate action, wrote me an innocent little email saying, and not to me, to the Prairie Starfish web email address, is there any chance Dr. Olson could possibly, answer a couple questions? And I just write back sometimes, people like that, like, yeah, Dr. Olson's right here. It's me. I'm doing nothing right now, watching tennis. Why don't you pick up your phone? Here's my number. Call me right this minute. And sometimes people will call kind of stunned, like, well, I wasn't expecting to talk to you. And then I'll talk their ear off for an hour and they'll get more than they had ever hoped for. But it's always really fun for me, because that's helping me understand people's perception of narrative and ABT and seeing how quickly they pick it up. And sometimes it leads to really constructive things. So our guest today is one of those examples, exactly that. I think about 6 months ago, Laura wrote me an innocent email just saying, I saw the ABT thing and was wondering, is there any chance that could have a few words to talk with Dr. Olson about this? And I wrote back and said, let's talk right now. And got on the phone, started talking with her. And, I can tell when people are listening and picking it up. And as soon as they really are starting to pick it up, then I'm really eager to talk a lot more. And that's what happened. We began a first discussion and she really took to a lot of these things. So on that note, let's have our guest join us right now, Laura Pavlakovich. And I held off saying your last name until you join us. Pavlakovich.
You got it.
I got it. Pavlakovich. Is that
Pavlakovich.
it? Pavlakovich. Wow. Yay.
Good
Yay
job.
Okay. Laura, okay, before we even go into your whole bio, I got some questions to ask you that will cue all of these. Your bio details will come out in the course of our conversation, but let's just start off with, let me asking you, what would you consider at this point in life your single most important professional achievement?
Starting the nonprofit that we're here to talk about.
Oh, and now what nonprofit would that be?
I run a type 1 diabetes advocacy nonprofit called You're Just My Type that I founded back in 2016.
And I've heard plenty about diabetes. Type 1, there must be some other types. If there's a type 1, can you give us a little bit of background on what type 1 is?
There's a few different types. Type 1 is an autoimmune disease where your body starts attacking its healthy pancreas cells. So people with type 1 diabetes don't produce any insulin on their own. So we have to take insulin shots or wear insulin pumps, count our carbohydrates, test our blood sugar, and constantly be keeping our blood sugars within a certain range because our bodies cannot do that for us.
And who's the person you know best who has type 1 diabetes?
Myself.
There you go.
I know a lot of people in the community now, but
All right, that's our first crucial biographical detail for you. Exactly. And so when did you first come to realize in life that you had type 1 diabetes?
I was diagnosed around age 5. And the symptoms are all pretty typical for everyone. You lose weight very quickly, frequent urination, you have like a constant thirst, you get very weak. They're very similar to flu symptoms. So a problem that happens often is that parents think their child has the flu. So they're pumping them with Gatorade and Sprite and all of these liquids with sugar in them, which is just causing their blood sugar to go even higher and putting them in a much worse state than they would have been if they were just diagnosed right
and
away.
Is there sort of an average age that kids get diagnosed at? No,
absolutely not. In fact, type 1 diabetes used to be referred to as juvenile diabetes, and type 2 was referred to as adult onset diabetes, but they've stripped away those names because we like to say diabetes does not discriminate. You can be any age, any race, any phase in your life, and you can still be diagnosed.
Yeah, now that you say that term, that rings a bell. I remember hearing adult onset diabetes. Yeah, juvenile. Oh, wow, interesting. Okay, so they've gotten rid of those terms, replacing the type 1, type 2. Interesting. And tell us a little bit about what your life has been dealing with it starting back then. And I'm guessing that there have been improvements in the medical technology that have helped you. Can you tell us a bit about that?
There has been, yeah. So I was diagnosed around 1996. And back then there was about 2 types of insulin, and it would be like a cloudy form and a clear form. And you would have to roll the insulin in your hand. And it was this very old fashioned way of doing things.
Wait. What would you roll in your hand? What do you mean?
To mix the insulin vial, you would take it and have to roll it in your hand to mix the insulin before giving it to yourself. And I'd have to get a shot in the morning and then eat at very specific times throughout the day as a child in order to make sure the insulin was working at the time it was supposed to. And since then, now we have these things called insulin pumps that you can put an infusion set in your body. You change it every 3 days, but there's a reservoir of insulin in the pump. And you
okay, whoa. All right, slow this way down. Give us the graphic details of how this all works, the mechanism, and what the insulin pump is. And
so an insulin pump is about the size of a pager. They have a few different companies that make them.
Wait, a pager? What do you mean a pager? Like a how about a silver dollar or something like that?
No, an insulin pump is about the size of a pager.
Oh, I got you. Okay. The size of a cigarette pack, almost that shape.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe like a small iPhone for kids.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
When they came out, pagers still existed. So that was the easiest thing to compare their size to.
Yeah.
I guess that is very outdated.
That's what I'm reaching for.
So the pump has a tube connected to it, and the tube goes into your body and it pumps insulin through you, and you could just press a button and get insulin. Or you can be on insulin pens, which I'm on, and you just connect a needle to the pen and get insulin injections throughout the day. And now we have these things called continuous glucose monitors. And those are what I think you're referring to. There's one that's about the size of a quarter. There's one that is a little bigger, and that tells us our blood sugars via Bluetooth.
Oh, wow.
To an app. And that did not exist at all when I was growing up with it.
And so wait a second, that's giving you like a minute by minute update on your blood sugar?
Yeah. So the one I wear, you can scan. It's kind of like Apple Pay. So I scan it, and then it reads my blood sugar every time I scan it. And if my blood sugar goes high or low, it alerts me without me having to scan.
Is it on your arm? Where?
It's on my leg right now, so it's not visible.
Is there, you move it around different places, or does it irritate things?
This one it dies every 2 weeks. So after every 2 weeks, I have to take it off and put a new one on. It's sometimes painful. I mean, you kind of just push the needle and sensor into you and take the needle out, and the sensor stays in. Oh. And there's another company that makes one, and then that lasts 10 days long. And that one alerts you every 5 minutes. It updates your blood sugar without you having to scan or anything.
Amazing. What do you think this type 1 diabetes was like 50 years ago for people that had it?
I've talked to many people who were diagnosed then. I've heard stories about people having to boil their needles on the stove to sanitize them before getting injections. So we've come a long way. The frustrating part is we've come a long way, but with the technology and the advancements, they cost a lot of money. So they're not available to all type 1 diabetics.
Yeah, amazing. So tell us a little bit about your career progression. You graduated from high school in Southern California. And
Yes.
then what'd you do after high school?
I attended a photojournalism program. It was this very unique program. It was based in Germany, and it was based on injustice and poverty. So from there, we traveled to lots of different countries and did like outreach programs and photo projects in Thailand and China and Hong Kong and Dubai, Egypt.
Let me ask you a few questions on the technical side of how you got trained with that sort of stuff. Did they train you any techniques in how to make an image tell a story? Did you have much training on that?
I think that's what the goal was for every activity, but it was just based off experience. So we got to be around so many different types of people and learn how to connect, even when you didn't speak the same language as them. And I loved how easy it was for me to be able to like look into the souls of these people when I took their photograph.
What was the best stuff you learned in your training in the school that you went to there? You went to a school in Europe, right?
Mm-hmm. I think it just showed me how connected humans are from all over the world. You can be in different parts of very different lives, but you know, we're all connected.
But I mean, in terms of technical side of training as photographers, do you have?
We had we had photo classes every week, photo assignments. We lived in this very cool, we stayed in this castle, and the basement of the castle was converted into a dark room, and we did all film photography, and we were mixed with fine art students and music students. So it was like a bunch of creative young students from all over the world just traveling together and doing these projects.
You learned still, even in this digital day and age, you learned darkroom techniques of developing prints and things like that, and all the chemicals and stuff. That's very cool. I did that back when I was a science student, and take my own photos and spend hours and hours in the darkroom. Very, very cool. And how long did you spend over there in Europe?
I was just there for about a year. It was a very condensed program. Then I came back to Redondo Beach.
Gotcha. And your type 1 diabetes, is that ever a difficulty in traveling and things like that? Or you kind of got it down where it's routine?
Oh, it is so difficult.
Really?
When I was at that school, actually, they had never had a type 1 diabetic student, and they were very scared of the liability that they would have.
Oh, God.
So they didn't want me going on most of the trips, and I had to beg them, and I had to find ways to refrigerate my insulin everywhere I went. And being in different countries like Egypt, we'd go to these villages and they'd hand you baked goods and desserts and sweets, and it was disrespectful to say no. So when I first got there, I was just eating all of the sugar, and my blood sugar was going so dangerously high. And it took me a few days to figure out. I would have to they'd hand me something and I'd throw it to somebody else without them seeing, because I didn't want to be rude. But traveling is hard. Insulin goes bad easily if it's not at the right temperature. You're in a different time zone, which messes with your body, because I get an insulin shot every 12 hours. It's not easy. It's not easy at all to travel, but it's very doable. It just adds an extra layer of planning and preparation.
Yeah. All right. So now tell us, what was the inspiration to start this nonprofit?
So when I came home, I had this, what I like to say, like a moral obligation to change the world, whether I liked it or not. I had seen so much at such a young age, and I knew I wanted to do something with photography. I was very lost on what that could be, especially living in this very comfortable bubble in Southern California. There weren't these huge projects I thought I could do that would make a difference. And in 2016, I met a woman who had a type 1 diabetic son, and he was 4 years old. And she told me that he cries himself to sleep at night and feels like he's the only person on this planet living with this disease. And I just listened, and I didn't even tell her I was type 1 yet. I just kept nodding. And she said the sentence, "I can only show him statistics on a computer so many times of how many other people have this disease." And I was like, oh my gosh, I should take photographs of type 1 diabetics from all over the world, so this boy and people like him have pictures to look at and humans and faces to look at instead of numbers. So I started You're Just My Type, and it just started as a blog.
Okay,
And I
okay,
just,
all right. Wait a second. So I'm all like teary eyed now from that story. Literally. And for all the listeners, this was the one assignment I gave her. Was I said, can you tell us one good story? And you just nailed it there.
and
I
this
mean,
wasn't even the story I had prepared.
oh wow, you would say, well, there you go. Even better. But the one part you haven't paid off in that was, when did you reveal to her that you were type 1 yourself?
At the end of the conversation, for sure.
And what
I just,
did her jaw drop or anything?
yeah, we just had this moment of like, okay, we were supposed to meet at this time. Yeah, it was a special moment.
That's, I mean, for everybody listening along, the ultimate part of story as its power is in the singular moment. And in the course, we're constantly working on the singular narrative. This is what it all comes down to. Our brains are just programmed to look for the singular thing and hit this ultimate thing. In all great movies, that's where they all have their big climax, and that one moment where it all comes together. One of the exercises I got taught to do years ago, woman who works with the Mayo Clinic, I think, and trains them in communications, and she ran me through this little exercise, which to do with physicians, doctors. And I've done a bunch of workshops with doctors. And what we do is you pair them up and they sit down and you have them tell the story to each other of, I want you to tell us the story of the one moment in all of your profession where you felt all of your training in medical school and everything coming together in a single moment. And the stories that come out are incredible. They're mostly from emergency rooms. And these guys tell these stories about, all of a sudden this guy came in there and he had a bullet in his heart. And I'd never been confronted with that, but I remember this thing from medical school. I remember this, and it all came together. And then what we do as the exercise is you have the person A tells their story, person B tells their story, person A. Then person B regurgitates person A's story back to them and vice versa. Then we get together as a group and talk about this. And you begin quizzing them. Okay, when your partner regurgitated your story back to you, how did they do with the information? Did they have it straight? How many people were in the emergency room? What time of night it was? All this stuff. And you find out that about 50% of the information is retained. Then you say, well, now what about the emotional stuff, the ups and downs? You thought you were going to save the guy, then you thought you were going to lose him, blah, blah, blah. And it's always almost 100%. And it shows you in storytelling that emotion is so much more powerful of an element than is information and facts, things like that. But the biggest point is that the way you get these great stories out of people is you define this one moment for them to really focus in on. And that's why that was such a great story there, was that it was well set up, but then it really built to this whole idea and this tension, this idea that she's pouring her story out to you and something that she doesn't know. And you've got a punchline to her eventually that you finally reveal. And then the two of you have that moment together there. That is a truly great story. This is why you're here right now having this conversation with me, because as you and I talked even that first day, you were picking up on so much of the stuff I was telling about. And there's just lots of people that have already got a head start in grasping what narrative is and why it's so important. And then eventually, let's see, what happened was I think I sent you a copy of the ABT book, The Narrative Gym, and then sort of like, here you go, good luck, have a good life. And then a couple of weeks later, I heard back from you and you sent me a draft of an ABT and said, what do you think of this? And, that's all it takes to get another phone call from me. Like, wow, this is good. You're really getting it. And then we got into the thick of that. And eventually I tried to explain to you this Dobzhansky template, which is nothing in blank makes sense except in the light of, and before I could even finish the sentence, nothing in type 1 diabetes makes sense except in the light of, what did you say?
Community.
Isn't that amazing? And yeah, and it was like your intuition was already there and was jumping out ahead of me. Where this whole thing was headed to. And when you said community, I like stopped, like, wait, you didn't let me say fill in the blanks yet. And you said, I don't need you to finish. I know exactly what the one word is at the core of this. Okay. And so now take it from that moment and tell me what transpired after that.
So I recently decided to take on the nonprofit full time instead of just treating it like a passion project, but I couldn't figure out what steps to take next. And that's where you really helped me, because you said, well, what is the problem you're trying to fix?
There you go.
The problem. I'm like, oh my God, there's one, like I have to choose one. And this is when I wanted to make sure that whatever I was doing was going to help everyone. And even if I thought there was a problem, I needed everyone else to think it was the same problem, or else I was going to put all of this work into something that didn't really matter. So we have the nonprofit has a pretty big following on Instagram. So I asked all of the 43,000 followers, what do you guys think is the biggest problem in the type 1 community? And the majority of people responded saying that we don't have enough mental health resources. Wow. Which is exactly what I thought was the problem. So it was very reassuring to hear that I was not alone in this. And so I thought about what I could do to help. And now You're Just My Type hosts mental health events and meetups for type 1 diabetics of different age groups in Los Angeles. We just started this year. So we've done one for young girls, young boys, adults, and now we're starting the cycle all over again.
That's amazing. Okay. My toughest critic in all the work that I do with the ABT framework is my good buddy, Matt here. So Matt, how are we doing? Are you impressed with what she's saying?
Super impressed. Laura, you're ahead of the curve and frankly making me a little jealous. I was supposed to be the shining pupil of Randy Olson, so if you'd step back a little bit, I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks.
Stealing the limelight.
Let's just end the interview here.
Yeah, exactly. Quit while you're ahead.
Oh no, a technical difficulty. Yeah. Sorry, Laura, I think we're losing you.
Right.
They're like, Laura can't reach us now. And Matt's like, I'll take over.
This is my show, damn it.
You can talk about me now.
So let's see, Matt, why don't we, how about if we take a moment here? Can you go to Laura's website, You're Just My Type, and on there is a video that she's posted there. And I think that this video was made after we'd had our conversation about the one word community, right? Yes. There we go.
Randy, I didn't tell my videographers to make that video like that. I gave them a list of questions and part of them had to do with community, and they decided on their own to make a completely separate video asking them what community means to them. And they sent it back to me and I was like, oh my God, that wasn't even me. They did that.
That's truly amazing. I mean, that's clearly your central theme. Okay. So Laura, tell us what this video is and who are the people in it. For people just listening on audio, you're just going to hear a sequence of voices for about a minute, but yeah, tell us about it.
So this video is from my first co-ed adult type 1 mental health event. And I had a bunch of people come together in Los Angeles. We had a type 1 therapist come and do a guided meditation. And we had breakout groups with different topics about stress and diabetes. And this is one of the videos we made with all of the attendees at that event.
The T1D community is so important to me. I feel really, really grateful because just to have someone close to you who understands it, like there's no better feeling.
It forms a sense of connection, and it also makes this disease feel a lot less lonely.
The reality of doing day-to-day things with type 1, it's not as simple as just giving insulin for food, and we need each other to be able to fill that gap.
And the fact that we heal in community, it is so vital to be connected.
At the end of the day, we have other people that understand truly what we go through on a day-to-day basis, from going to work, from working out, to playing sports, to emotional, physical, and mental aspect of just living our life with this disease. And it feels really, really good to be able to connect with individuals in the type 1 diabetes community.
The community is everything to me.
Okay, so I think I counted 5 times people said the word community in there, but then you said that the filmmakers themselves were cueing people saying, what does community mean to you? So it's not surprising they would echo that back. But yeah, it seems like it's a bullseye. That really is the central element of what the focus of your website is. And there are probably lots of websites that don't have that goal of trying to build a community. They're just like, here's a bunch of resources for you. But you're actively working on this social events and pulling people together to meet each other, which really is sort of a derivation of support groups. Support groups, I think, are more structured exercises than that. And you're probably doing just a little less structured, but by having those events, just people meeting each other to match notes. And tell us about some of those experiences at those events.
Exactly. So when I started these events in the beginning, I wanted like mental health professionals there and a full team of type 1 therapy, like all of these people. And it took me a second to realize that the events themselves are the mental health resources. Like the people just coming together is exactly what they need. I invited someone to come, and he hadn't been around that many type 1 diabetics before. And I make sure to have my full team type 1. So the videographers were type 1 diabetic, the photographer was type 1 diabetic. And this guy shows up and he's looking around, and everyone around him has their sensors on their arms, their pumps, and he's going to everyone and he's like, "Are you type 1 diabetic? Are you type?" And they're like, "Yes." And he goes to the videographers and he's like, "You're type 1 diabetic too?" And they're like, "Yes." He finds the photographer. He's like, "Don't tell me you're type 1 as well." And he's like, "Yes, I am." And he's like, "Everybody here is type 1 diabetic." And he like could not believe that when he looked around, there was about 50 people in the room who all shared his disease. And it was so special to see his reaction.
That's unbelievable. I mean, that is the power. It's the same power of support groups. You know, nobody
1,000%.
Nobody can understand your thing unless they're experiencing it. My one experience for real with that, I mean, years ago, I was involved in helping folks with a AIDS support group. So I learned a lot about support groups of that. I just did that as a volunteer, as a kind of separate exercise. But for me, 3.5 years ago, my house burned down in the wildfires here in California. And in the years since then, I go to parties, and nobody really can understand what you went through unless you run into somebody at a party who also had their house burned down. All of a sudden, you just sit down and you bonded. You can talk for an hour straight, and the other people come along like, "What are you guys talking about?" And you just kind of look at them like you really wouldn't understand. And it is that sort of syndrome that mostly people can't quite understand what you're going through unless they've experienced it themselves. And you deal a lot with that with the type 1.
Precisely. Type 1 diabetes is such an isolating disease. It doesn't help that there's a lot of stigma around it. There's a ton of misunderstanding and miseducation. So when you tell someone you're type 1 diabetic, they have a list of stereotypes in their head already, which makes you feel like you don't even want to talk about it with other people. But yes, I guarantee most people you ask will agree that you just feel very isolated with this, and it's an invisible disease. So if you don't have your sensors or devices showing, or if you don't wear them, nobody knows you're sick or have a chronic condition. So it's already invisible. Like you said, nobody understands. Your family can try as hard as they want, but when they're not understanding how you feel when your blood sugar is low or high, it just doesn't click. And like you said as well, when you meet another type 1 diabetic, it's like instant family, like instant. And it is such a special connection. And I don't take it for granted at all.
Okay. So off the top of your head, tell me an ABT.
Can I read my mission statement? That is an ABT.
Oh, yeah. Please do. Yes. Excellent.
That you helped me with. I have to give you some credit.
Of course. Yeah.
So we wrote that there are a number of organizations that support type 1 diabetes, and they do a lot of great work. However, they fail to address what's quite possibly the most important challenge, mental health. This is where You're Just My Type comes in. We're dedicated to strengthening connections within the community through inclusive events, social networking, and direct support.
Pretty clear. Matt, your critique of that ABT, what do you think?
Fantastic. I mean, that says it all. That sets up like the great heaven of like where they're at in the community, like how much resources there are. Then suddenly we're the lack up. There's this one hole of everything that could be. So here's the action. Let's make this happen. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Laura, have I told you about the Matt template? I don't know if I have. This was a recent development in the training we've done. So it's been 10 years now since I adapted the ABT into a template from the South Park guys who talked about it as a basic dynamic for narrative structure. And then I've had 10 solid years of promoting this thing. And now it's really taken off like a mass movement. And as I say, this fall, there's so many the World Bank is going to be starting to train people there among many groups. So we're gaining momentum with all of that. And then, I'm the guy that wrote all the books. So wouldn't we assume that I would be the great creator of all the knowledge? But Matt started 2 years ago working and running the course with me and was force-fed this stuff day in and day out and began coming up with all these interesting observations and ideas and thoughts. And then about, probably 4 or 5 months ago now, we were talking one day, and he now runs little workshops off to the side, training some groups, kind of coaching sessions. And he said, I came up with a thing yesterday in this coaching session, and see if you think this is interesting. What I think the ABT is at its core is nothing more than heaven and heaven, but hell, therefore action. And when he told me that, like the simplest thing ever, I said, wait a second, let me process this. And then as it started to soak in, like, oh my goodness, you're right. And but therefore is nice. But that is the simplest and deepest of levels. And what's so important about that for communication, this for everybody listening, is it's the heaven and heaven. And so here's what people don't do is that, if you really want to put together a compelling argument, you want to begin by painting this really vivid picture of heaven. And, there are all these challenges we got. And if we can do this and this, then we can conquer all those challenges and we can have this wonderful society with everything is absolutely perfect. Then on the word, but you take us to hell. But none of that is happening right now because we don't have the funding for it. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. Therefore, we got to do this. And it's extremely simple, but that's what it is basically. And what we find is that it's hard for people to really grasp that first part, the heaven and heaven. People are so driven to get right into their problem. Everything. Do you realize the problems we got, especially environmentalists? They are just driven by their problems. They don't know how to paint us a picture before you get going on your problems about how cool the world could be. And I think that's something for you to take away from this little chat is continue to think in those terms, how inspiring it is for people to hear that initial thing of heaven and heaven. I see a world in which people no longer, have any sort of difficulties from this problem. But we're not there yet, and right. Because we're not doing this, we don't have enough of a community put together because we know now that community is a crucial element. Therefore, we're running this thing. So it's at the core of what you've already written there, but it's just that it's that understanding that the power comes in dividing these elements really cleanly, having only heaven up front before we get into any problems. Let people just savor the vision that you've got of how good life can be. Then take us into the hell and then give us a little bit of explanation of why we've got that. And that motivates people then. And then by the time you're in the middle of that, they're like, oh, therefore, what are you going to do? I want to hear, what are your actions? Right. Well, yeah, we've got this group. Does that all make sense?
Perfectly. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's really great, just hearing how you've implemented these things because we do these things day in and day out. And, my Twitter handle is ABT Agenda. We are on this agenda to make the world a less boring place, basically, to have people working more and more with an awareness of narrative structure. And when I started this 10 years ago, the very first big talk I gave was the TED Med talk. And people came up to me afterwards and said, I've been giving these and talks and never thought there was anything wrong with it. This is the first time anybody said there's anything. And it's not that it's wrong. It's just that there's a better way to do this. And I think that's our mission with the stuff that we do. You've got a very clear mission, which is to try and help strengthen this community of folks with type 1 diabetes. What's the pathway forward? You're now organizing lots of events. And tell us a few things about what you're up to and where you're headed.
So we definitely want to continue year-round support. When I was growing up, there was diabetes camps once a year, and this I definitely just want to make year-round, every month an event. And our next step is going to be to expand outside of Los Angeles and create a business model where I can take it to San Francisco and Nashville and Austin and have people running it there so that everybody can experience what these events can do for them.
And so in other words, you're using Los Angeles as your model system to then clone around, which is, it's the exact same thing that we're doing. For example, this fall, we're doing 4 different organizations. And for example, World Bank, we're going to be running a session with their offices in Kenya and in Singapore.
Wow.
And yeah, there was this awesome guy from Kenya who wrote to me about a month and a half ago, and he sent me an ABT and said, I've read all your books and they're awesome, but we're not practicing this here in the World Bank and we need to. Therefore, what's the chance we can set up to blah, blah, blah. And that's the same thing, is that we're going to do that as a first model with just 30 people, and then they'll gear up to clone it all around the place. And that's how you spread these things. So that's very cool that you're doing that same sort of model that way. What are the actual event? Let's see. The website is You're Just My Type.
You'rejustmytype.com, YOURE. And it has all of our upcoming events. I have a girls event that's coming up this coming Saturday. And then we have a women's event next month. I'm doing this like very beautiful beach picnic for type 1 women during sunset. It's just going to be about like divine femininity and connection. And then I have a young adult retreat at a camp in August. And then I'll probably do another adult event in September. So I'm just pumping them out right now, trying different things, experimenting. They're all different. So it's fun to find new activities and speakers for each one.
That's very, very cool. Yeah, very parallel pathway to what we've been doing for a number of years here. As you say, you just got to keep experimenting, and things that work, you go with, and things not so much, you set to the side, and constantly modifying and tweaking, learning as you go along. That's what we're doing. The stuff with Pfizer right now has been really cool, where we're running the narrative gym with them. And each week we're adjusting little things as we kind of fine tune the model of what we can eventually spread wide. Well, that is so awesome, and glad that we could have helped you. Let's see, how much have I charged you for all these consulting services? You're just my type. I need to know what to send you an invoice for.
I plead the fifth.
Yeah, no, big fat zero. Exactly. So when really cool causes like this come along, I enjoy the conversations. I mean, another one that I'm digging deep into now is the anti-gun violence groups. And for 12 years, I've been trying to get involved with them. And you wouldn't believe how hard it is to volunteer your time when people don't want to hear anything. I mean, so many of these organizations, and I just yesterday had a long talk with one expert, a professor who's published a lot on the issue of gun violence. And you know, I've been wound up on the issue ever since the 1980s when I lived in Australia and realized there are countries that don't have slaughter events like these. And so he's an expert, and he gave me a tutorial yesterday on the major groups. And what I heard is the same old sad thing that back when I did that work with AIDS groups, which is no matter how divine the cause, egos come in and these groups start competing against each other. And he was telling me about the big one is the Brady group, Brady United, since way back when Reagan was assassination attempt and James Brady was shot. And they're the big one. And then Everytown came along and Michael Bloomberg just gave them a bunch of millions of dollars. And he said the people at the Brady group are now furious about that. And the two groups don't like each other. You know, all this, it happens. It's inevitable. The competition in these different sorts of groups. But they need the ABT dynamic, really. You know, I look at a lot of their mission statements. That's the thing. Your mission statement is really good there. It's just very simple. And you know what else? The crazy thing with that is nobody's going to change that much. I've talked about this thing. A friend of mine, for example, one friend of mine, editor on big documentaries, wrote an opening slide for a documentary that's on Netflix right now that was ABT. And over the course of a year and a half of editing, all the other producers and the director and everybody else and then came in and rewrote that opening thing. They changed every single word in it. They never changed the ABT structure. So once you lock onto that structure, it's really hard to argue, well, let's make this where it's just and. No, you won't go that way. So you may tweak that mission statement down the line.
There's no going back.
Yeah, it's not going back.
Once you go ABT, you don't go back.
That's my point precisely. So really great that we could help convert you into the land of ABT. And thank you so much for taking the time here to chat with us. The website, once again, is yourjustmytype.com. And very, very cool. You know, just a model.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And thank you for all your help.
You betcha. All right. Good luck and keep us posted. We'll talk to you again somewhere down the road.
Will do. Thank you.